Listen, there's no declaration about media more obnoxious, more stereotypical, more overplayed than, was this made on drugs? I can name several other bad declarations. Did the writers have a fetish? Or where was the context in the first place? Are some I've had to run into. As you can probably tell from my new most popular video, I've gotten the latter a lot. Still, the drugs line is the most overplayed out of all of them. No matter how many times you try to put us to bed, someone will always try to sneak it back, thinking that their version will be more clever. It discourages creativity in a time where it's more welcome than ever. We don't need people overreacting to the most mundane of logic bending. We need the suspension of disbelief more than ever. I'm not even gonna say I'm utterly innocent of this. Sometimes I've reacted to particularly concerning ideas and executions by thinking, oh, there had to be some crack involved, right? I reacted like this to Go Nagai's Dorodon Embi-chan, a spin-off of Dorodon Enma-kun that starts out with sleazy, extremely immoral humor and ends in Go Nagai participating in self-destruction. It's not pretty and it's not fun, but it doesn't mean that it was made on drugs. To go off of that, what happens when you run into a weird idea like that? Like something really concerning, something that makes you question what the hell was going on. Like actually. Say you were at an arcade, and you found a pinball table called Popeye Saves the Earth. You might think to yourself smugly, whoa, an environmentally themed pinball game with Popeye in it? Was that thought up on drugs? As it turns out, the answer may very well be yes. Alright, let's get something straight. I actually can't confirm that Popeye Saves the Earth was devised on drugs. The closest to a source on this factoid is a secondary recollection made by Williams alumni Steve Ritchie. You might recognize his voice from Mortal Kombat, and you might have played one of his tables. He was famous for flow-based design and for taking his actual real-life altercation with the cops and making that into high speed.
My hand went into this hole, this lightning hole, and then the sprocket spun past the swing arm right here and snipped it off. It didn't hurt as bad as you'd think. It just kind of burned. I'm used to it. It still works a clutch.
In a 2010 conversation on rec.game.pinball, a Usenet forum, he had a lot to say about Popeye. We'll get to the rest of his statement later on, but for right now, our most important piece of information is the first sentence. Barry Ausler designed the game, but it was Python's theme, including the weird euphorics-influenced eco-connection. I have to assume that Ritchie meant euphoriants, drugs like MDMA. Searching euphorics on Google actually leads to another rabbit hole entirely. A startup about non-alcoholic drinks that enhance your brain? It's a huge scam alert. In any case, considering that Steve Ritchie was one of the main pinball designers and voice actors at Williams Electronics, I don't see any reason not to believe him. I mean, it's very much believable that at least one of them took drugs. The thing is, it's not like they assembled these machines on the assembly line while snorting crack. The theme that Ritchie mentions doesn't just come down to the Popeye license, it comes down to much more than that. Stop! I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Before we move on, I have to remind myself that not everyone is familiar with the nooks and crannies of pinball. This is what I'll call the glossary section, to explain the main nouns of the entire situation. Now, I don't need to explain Popeye, do I? He's in the animation news recently, as the Tartakovsky movie at Sony ended up being leaked in storyboard form. For the record, King Features has it revived, but with Genndy Tartakovsky having his hands full, it might take a while. In any case, Popeye was one of the big comic strip turned cartoon stars of the quote-unquote golden age of animation, with several shorts produced for Paramount Pictures by Fleischer Studios and their immediate successor, Famous Studios. After these fizzled out, King Features would produce their own shorts for TV. These are often derided for poor animation and bizarre stories, but were nonetheless instrumental in keeping Popeye alive in public consciousness.
Junior! Junior? Don't call me a sissy name like that! My name is...
A 1980 live-action movie by Paramount and Disney tried to capitalize on the character's success, but to not too much avail. Nintendo actually wanted to do a video game of Popeye around the same time, but the rights were out of reach, so they made Donkey Kong, which did so well that they finally nabbed the rights to do a Popeye arcade game anyway. And lots of other projects that I don't feel like bringing up at the moment. Point is, Popeye is famous, you might know him from things. So how about WMS Industries? At the time, one of the biggest companies in gaming. All definitions of it. In the 1990s, pinball machines were being released under the Williams and Bally brands, while video games were being released under the Midway brand, their most famous brand name. All the while, WMS were getting their toes wet in gambling and redemption games. The former investment would pay out big time, as the company still exists today as a casino gaming corporation. Their video game assets, including the Midway brand, were spun off in 1996 and lie with Warner Brothers today. Their pinball operations would cease in late 1999, but their original IPs and characters made under them still remain with WMS to be licensed out to interested parties like Planetary Pinball and Zen Studios. Let's try and put our shoes into the state of the company in 1994. Midway had struck a deal with Nintendo to produce Cruisin' USA and Rare's Killer Instinct to promote the Ultra 64. They suddenly buy out TradeWest and convert it into a remote video game developer under the Williams brand in defiance of Acclaim's grip on Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam. They had just produced some of the best-selling machines in pinball history in the prior 2 years: Pat Lawler's Addams Family and Twilight Zone, Steve Ritchie's Terminator 2, The Getaway, and Star Trek The Next Generation, his brother Mark Ritchie's Fish Tales and Indiana Jones' The Pinball Adventures. Spy Hunter designer George Gomez leaped into pinball with Corvette, and future PSYOP/Stranglehold director Brian Eddy would try his hand with The Shadow, based on the 1994 movie of the same name. Piece of shit pedophile John Trudeau pumps out a trilogy of overly difficult license tables with no real identity besides having really wide drains. That would be the case without work put in by programmer Jeff Johnson, artist Kevin O'Connor, and animator Scott Slomayani. In my opinion, they're the huge reasons why Creature from the Black Lagoon stands as a classic. So you think you know where this is going? Oh, look at this huge empire, and then Popeye comes out and everything dies. Well, no, not really. Pinball peaked with Adams, and really sales were only really dropping. Sure, Twilight Zone and Star Trek did really good, but nothing really reached the heights of Adams, which sold over 20,000 units, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider how many places might have an Adams pinball machine, that's a lot of restaurants and bars and basements. In any case, tables from afterwards that weren't breaking the 10,000 threshold did fine, but it wasn't an industry that WMS were satisfied with after a certain point. Their failed attempt to revitalize things with Pinball 2000 in 1999 is infamous. However, Popeye would be a landmark table for WMS anyway. It all has to do with who made it, the aforementioned Barry Oursler and Python Anghelo. Just because it took too long to mention them doesn't mean that they're not important. If anything, Oursler can be credited with helping save the industry. Space Shuttle in 1984 put 7,000 units in a time where Williams would sometimes just not make 1,000 on certain machines. His most frequent collaborator was artist and concept man Python Anghelo. Their first machine together was the amusement park themed Comet in 1985, and they would go on to make Pinball in 1986, one of the most iconic machines in the industry. Notably, Anghelo did the art for Pinball first, and Oursler based the design off of that. Together, they would make many of the weirder tables of the late 80s, culminating in The Machine, the very sensual sequel to Pinball that features a giant robot woman. You see, Anghelo might have been horny? Too horny. We'll get to that later. I'll have to save that for the next video. Their final collaboration would be Popeye Saves the Earth, and in fact, it would be Anghelo's final release work at Williams. After failing to get his vertical pinball circus concept off the ground, he left the company for another manufacturer. We'll also have to say that for the next video. Oursler would do a few more tables, including the excellent casino-themed Pinball remake with Defender co-creator Larry DeMar, Jackpot. Anghelo apparently wasn't a fan, but I generally don't care. Jackpot rules. While I'm at this topic, I think I'll get back to Steve Ritchie's quite bitter recollection of events. It was already implied when I called Anghelo more of a concept man, but he said, Python was not and will never be a game designer. He will say anything, truthful or not. This is not to say that he didn't come up with many good ideas for the games he worked on, but he never drew anything more than sketches except when doing the artwork for the playfield, backglass, and plastics. Barry was the designer of Popeye. So what did Python do on Popeye? He did the art, recognizable through his use of animals that clash with regular Popeye characters, but mainly, he did the concept. See, some pinball games by Williams have write-ups associated with them. If you go on Planetary Pinball's website, you can actually find the old websites made for Williams and Bally pinball machines dating back to 1995. The Champion Pub and Junkyard have backstories associated with them, made to add a little more context to the game. You don't really need them, but they're neat little things to put on the website. The actual production pipelines of pinball games in the 90s are something of a mystery to me, but you'd be surprised how much story was a key part of 90s pinball games, even if they were very simple. In Adams, you're exploring the mansion and interacting with the residents. In Creature from the Black Lagoon, you're navigating the inconveniences of a 1950s drive-in theater until the titular fishman comes to steal your girlfriend. In Fish Tales, you're trying to successfully lie about the size of the fish you catch, and so on. This is where it all comes together. What happens when the oddball of the Williams alumni writes out a whole story, supposedly on MDMA, about Popeye? You get the original concept for Popeye Saves the Earth, a strange document you would not believe, filled with typos. What follows is a dramatic reading thereof. Preface. One of the problems with comic features that have run for half a century is keeping it from looking 50 years old. After perusing the materials that King Features sent to me, it became very obvious that Popeye the Sailor has not kept up with the times. I'm proposing to take Messrs. Seeger and Sagador's work into the 20th century and beyond. What an exciting undertaking. I feel proud and challenged to be a small part of Popeye's crew. The story. Popeye, the tugboat captain, is 50, is financially comfortable, and lives on his island. Unfortunately, he is also bored at the same time. His financial security comes from his royalties earned from endorsements for a major Spanish company. Additionally, he receives residuals from high-sold cartoon gigs. He watches The Simpsons, reruns of The Flintstones, and even his old competitor, Mickey Mouse. He still enjoys seeing reruns of his old show. Unfortunately, boredom has led to consuming too much spinach brew, and he's feeling restless. Olive Oil, born in New York City, is his still faithful wife. She tends to their spinach garden and has acquired one of the world's largest seashell collections. The seashells are important to her, almost as important as Popeye. She spends her time roaming the beaches in search of new shells. Sweet Pea, their adopted son, is in his early 30s. His name is now Geekass, a MS in marine biology, which is his father's secret ambition. He was a Navy pilot, but with the military scale down, has been retired early. He's having a problem in today's job market, so has decided to continue his studies. He's studying astrophysics to be in tune with the future. Bluto, Popeye's old foe, has a big oil business in the US. His oil company, Brutus Oil, has a huge oil spill. Bluto the oil tycoon is a ruthless, greedy man. He enjoys his collection of Jags and Rolls Royces, Las Vegas gambling sprees, and is still obsessed with stealing olive from Popeye, even after all of these years. Wimpy the Mooch still hangs around the old island, does garden work, and goes with Popeye on fishing trips. The Sea Hag runs and owns a Japanese-Norwegian fishing fleet that kills whales, porpoises. He overfishes the waters of the planet. Congratulations on the transition. The special day. Popeye goes fishing, and after 2 weeks of catching nothing but plastic bags, tires, styrofoam cups, and other junk, finally catches a 3-pound grouper that has propeller scars and speedboats on his back, has a mouthful of hooks, and purple eyes from mercury poisoning. Popeye pulls out the hooks, dresses the fish's wounds, and releases the fish back to the water. He then has a stiff shot of spinach schnapps and heads home totally disgustipated. While tying up the boat and bickering with Wimpy, who's hungry and unhappy because they have no fish to barbecue, Olive Oil shows up in a tiz while combing the beaches for shells on the island. Her feet were caught in globs of tar from Bluto's oil spill. Also, she went surfing. She got tangled in drift netting and stung by a discarded syringe that washed up on the beach. At this point, Popeye could stand it no more. He goes back to the continental US to search for a solution to what is happening to the world outside that is invading and poisoning his paradise. He returns to the old docks where he was a tugboat captain in New York. The waters are wretched and stink. Garbage floats all over the harbor. Everyone is concerned only with money, just making money. Disgusted, he goes to New Orleans, where he was once a shrimp boat captain. He finds the place overrun by offshore drilling, canal corrosion, pollution, and the shrimping industry is devastated. No. The shrimping industry is devastated. It's even worse than that. He goes to Los Angeles, where he was once a tuna boat captain, and finds that fishing is also lousy because the waters are overfished. But tuna mean money, and that's all people care for. In Alaska, he finds out about the Exxon Valdez. In Nova Scotia, he finds no cod, no pike on the Mississippi, just barge traffic and pollution. He sees Jacques Cousteau on TV begging humanity to stop the insanity. He reads about Diane Foss begging humanity to stop the insanity in Africa. He watches Carl Sagan, Peter Moyers, the Greenpeace people, all the conservationist gurus repeat the same theme, and realizes how grave is the destiny of his little paradise. The future of the whole planet is at stake. Popeye then remembers the story of Noah, and thinks that he was just a sailor, puts it together, and springs into action. He goes home, sells the island and his rights to the comic book and TV shows. With the money, he launches the operation of Popeye Arc 2000. Through his former special connections and sailor buddies from the Navy, and with the help of VP Gore, Popeye acquires Howard Hughes' Glomar Explorer, the biggest ship on Earth. With the help of Professor Hocus Pocus, he also acquires a NASA booster rocket and starts his genial project, building the Space Ark! It is as old as it is simple. Do what Noah did 1,000 years before because of the floodwaters. Today, he'll do it because of a flood of ignorant people. Haha. Once the Glomar Explorer is fitted with all accommodations and mini environments for all the creatures on the planet, Popeye casts off to all continents and seas of our planets to get a pair of every creature on board. In this endeavor, his son, Professor Hocus Pocus, Olive, and a crew of good-hearted idealistic college folks join him. In America, he gets 2 buffaloes, 2 bald eagles, 2 chipmunks, 2 manatees, and the last 2 condors in existence. He manages to get pairs of all creatures of the air, land, and sea. In South America, he gets 2 jaguars, 2 parrots, and 2 of each creature native to the area. In Africa, Asia, Australia, Antarctica, Europe. Back at Cape Canaveral, with the help of Professor Hocus Pocus, Popeye gets the best NASA engineers and techs to outfit the Glomar Explorer with a protective, clear plastic bubble over each deck. Also, he mounts 8 shuttle rocket boosters on each side of the giant ship and sets it upright, bow skyward, ready for launch. Olive Oyl has acquired all necessary provisions for the long journey ahead. Popeye's plan is heavily ridiculed. Religious leaders believe the coming Messiah is the answer. Business leaders think investments, production, and pollution is the answer. Professors believe that degrees in education will change the future. They all ridicule his plan to escape with the pairs of animals. Popeye replies to their cynicism in an extraordinary 2-hour telecast, underwritten by Texas billionaire Ross Perot. He announces his bold but simple plan to set off with the pairs of creatures into space to find a safe and comfortable place to assure the continuation of their survival, to save them from extinction. He gives a detailed tour of the Ark, and Olive Oyl launches a ship with a bottle of champagne. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff! Popeye heads for Saturn, the biggest planet in the solar system, and enters its orbit to use as a sling out of the solar system. Past Pluto, and out where the sun is a grain of salt behind the Ark. That wasn't a typo, I screwed up, sorry. Popeye's spaceship enters a terrible river of space storms never known to man or science before. It is a spatial Gulf Stream of whitewater rivers that flow between solar systems and galaxies. Professor Hocus Pocus has told Popeye about these storms before over Spanish schnapps before, but no one took him seriously. At this point, Popeye's Ark is traveling at great cosmic distances and travels in 1 week to places that comets and pulsars travel in 100 billion light years. Solar systems flash by like small villages on the shores of tumultuous rivers. Popeye and his crew stir close to the shores and look for a friendly planet, a place the same size and composition and distance from the sun as the planet Earth. Soon enough, there it is. The 99th system in the cosmic river shows the promised land. Popeye, looking through his cosmic binoculars, exclaims, "Blow me down!" It's blue with water as continents and clouds, and it's green and it's living. They steer the great Ark and enter the planet's solar system. On this planet, they land the ship in one of its 10 seas and are surrounded by strange boats. Everything stinks terribly. Water, the air. Popeye and the crew are taken to meet the leader, a big fellow with 3 eyes, a huge mouth, and no nose. Popeye notices no one has noses or a sense of smell. The planet is called Odosphere. Popeye tells him his quandary and of his intentions to find a planet to populate with the animals to save them and let them flourish. The leader is moved, but after seeing the crew and the animals, tells Popeye that the people/animals with noses suffer and die from unknown causes. So they kill them before they go insane. So in order for them to stay on the planet, they'd have to have their noses cut off. Popeye decides to go along with his journey and is given a pair of three-eyed tarantulas to take along. He refuels, resupplies, and launches all of the system down the great cosmic river. He finds another planet. Lands. The king is a spotted fellow on the front, striped on the back. All people are either spotted or striped. Obviously, Popeye and his crew are neither. Prejudice against others on this planet. Next planet, red planet, everything red. Alternative planet, unisex, gay, do not want pairs of heterosexuals. Jeremy, explore this one. Cannibalia, animals extinct, higher mental beings. Use lower mental beings as servants and protein supply. Other planet, high society of animals, eagles, that distrust people and won't allow them on the planet. Other planets? No water planet, 3 moon planet, female planet, planet with 2 suns, never nighttime. Jeremy, go fucking crazy with these. Popeye has had it. He's been traveling for too long. The ship needs repairs and animals are fucking. Somehow incorporate Bluto and Sea Hags into the ship's adventures. Popeye could go on visiting planets, hundreds of them, kings, solar system, and probably never find a place like home. He decides to leave the cosmic river and return on a cosmic shortcut through the Pravronian system of interstellar gaseous storms and ride them back to our solar system and planet Earth. He does, and returns many years later. He lands the Big Ark in the waters off Cape Canaveral, his port of call. By now, big mining extraterrestrial workships to the moon and Mars to mine for precious ore. The sky is polluted, the sea is oily and cloudy. Everything smells like Ordosphera. He finds only people, but no animals. Most people are dead from the pollution and resulting diseases or are eating each other from lack of food. Fortunately, there are a few wise people who allow Popeye's animals to replenish themselves and share the earth once more. He releases them into their natural habitats and there is somehow great joy. The end. You might be asking how the hell the actual pinball table reflects this 10-page concept document. The answer is, not thoroughly. I have to imagine that King Features was not happy with the meta-commentary or the oddly cynical and ridiculous plot. Popeye Saves the Earth is a fairly standard Popeye adventure that does away with the space theme. Not that Popeye was new to space. At Paramount, he actually starred in a space-themed short in 3D. In any case, the Noah's Ark and environmental motifs are still there. The ship is actually still called Popeye Ark 2000, but the motifs are there in a more family-friendly, broader sense. Bluto is still an oil tycoon, and the modes have you trying to combat his various capitalistic schemes. One of your goals is to rescue each animal depicted on the left of the playfield. Besides that, the original cartoon status quo is in effect, with Sweet Pea still an infant, Olive Oil being kidnapped, and Popeye still guzzling down spinach and not spinach alcohol to take down Bluto. And as an aside, I have no idea who Jeremy is. I know you were wondering, but I cannot remember any employee at Williams named Jeremy. If anyone can actually comment that, please let me know. Now, you'd think that a return to form would salvage the table's fortunes, instead of being that one pinball table where Popeye runs into a planet of gay people. Well, back to Steve Ritchie's Usenet post. Popeye was the game that followed Star Trek The Next Generation. Popeye didn't make money on the street. The theme was stinky and the geometry is funky, chunky, and clunky. No real players like the hidden shots and generally poor visibility that allowed function to follow form. It's hard to play upper playfield, didn't win it any friends. Graphics and art were just nasty, and speech, sound, script, and music were less than stellar. Popeye was expensive to build and carried hefty tooling and mold costs that were never amortized. Williams lost money on Popeye, something that hadn't happened for many years prior. Okay, let me clarify something. I don't agree with Steve Ritchie's "who cares about Popeye" stance. He goes on to just bash the decision to make a pinball table based on Popeye in the first place, saying that it was a nothing license in Europe in particular and that no distributors wanted it. Considering the standard that the original Fleischer cartoons set, in the midst of those shorts finding new life at the then nascent but still growing Cartoon Network, the Popeye theme does have a lot of potential for pinball, and I imagine it could have worked in the 90s. Granted, the table, the promo video for it, and the lack of association with Turner Broadcasting demonstrate a complete absence of those classic shorts. Saves the Earth is based more on those weird TV shorts than anything. I wouldn't even say it represents the original Pinball Theater or Popeye comic strips. Whatever. I definitely think Steve Ritchie's dispensal of Popeye as a theme is connected to his self-admitted hypermasculinity. We're talking someone who did pinball tables based on Terminator 2 and fast cars and an extreme sports clothing line. I mean, who cares about cartoons?
My games are never subdued. They're always intense, as intense as we can make them. I'm not sure why that is, but I don't do cute.
Hell, even his disdain for the art and sound, I think that just reflects an implied dislike for Python Anghelo more than anything. Not that there's no reason to dislike Anghelo, more on that later, but there's definitely bias afoot. I think the music is fine, Angelo's art is unique, and Williams' Midway mainstay Tim Kitzrow does a great job as Popeye.
Candy Graham. Oh, yeah.
That said, I cannot deny that the rest of Ritchie's text is based on some truth. Popeye wasn't the biggest flop in pinball, 4,217 units wasn't great at all, but they're a table from the same era from other manufacturers that did worse. Hell, even within Williams, the same year as Addams Family, John Trudeau's pirate-themed Black Rose comparatively sank with only 3,746 units. However, for those reasons Ritchie described, just the absolute weirdness of the playfield combined with the odd rules, not being helped by the enforcement of the shorter lightning flippers, pinball players do not like Popeye Saves the Earth. It has fans for sure, and its score on Pinside is only a 7 out of 10. But it's a go-to example for a pinball table that people don't like, and you're definitely not going to see many people that prefer it over, say, Star Trek. Not helping is that Williams' price on Popeye was apparently higher than before, perhaps due to all the custom parts that had to be made for it, and there was already a clause for distributors that said they had to take a certain amount of the machines run. I imagine this is where the unpopular in Europe claim comes from, unless someone can actually verify that no one in Europe cares about Popeye. I remember hearing there was a German distributor that had a surprising amount of creative control over Williams tables, including the mandate for shorter flippers on Popeye, along with the aforementioned Fishtails and Bram Stoker's Dracula. Oh, speaking of, now I'm going to end the video here. I was originally going to add an epilogue story about what Python Anghelo would do directly after his tenure at Williams. However, thinking back, I think all of that warrants its own video. Its own very wild video. Nevertheless, I can at least set the stage now. I mean, I've already set the stage enough by saying more on that later. The story of how Python Anghelo was whisked away by a famous name in arcade gaming and how he partially caused everything within that company's coin-op division to collapse with a failed soccer pinball table and a $25,000 porno table prototype needs to be heard to be believed. Now, earlier I mentioned a failed concept called a pinball circus. This would have been a solo design for Python Anghelo, perhaps disproving the allegations that he wasn't as involved with the design process as Steve Ritchie claimed. It's a famous story for pinball fans, and this video up on the screen covers it pretty damn well. In short, Anghelo has 2 prototypes for a pinball machine with a video cabinet footprint. It's considered too expensive to produce after a test run in Germany. Yes, there it is. Anghelo leaves Williams shortly after this frustration, presumably coupled with the frustration of seeing Jackpot. And, okay. If you're a pinball fan, you might know who I'm talking about. It might be very obvious, but considering how small the fanbase is, I imagine newcomers would be very shocked to hear who hired Anghelo and who was trying to get into pinball around the mid-90s.